All right, we are live. I have a very special guest today with me, live from Los Angeles. This is your host, Lord Hellespont V. And I have someone whom I really admire, whose jovial mood when talking about watches is infectious, and whose professorial style in conveying that passion and knowledge about horology is something that I can only aspire to. I have with me Bill Sanders from Watch Art Sci, Art and Science of Watch Collection. How are you, Bill?
I'm doing great. And I'm in Connecticut and I'm a Californian, so we got both coasts covered.
Great. That's how we connected. Not actually nothing about horology, just because we are both Californians in one way or another, right?
Yeah, a couple surfers.
So we are going to talk about the very special watch that Bill led in terms of a project, Lyrique Étude #1, who, as you know, was submitted for competition at the Grand Prix de Horlogerie in Geneva. So let's watch this nice little production they did to introduce the watch and move from there.
Nice little production they did.
I'm so sorry about that. I do this all the time. Let's see. Very, very inspiring. So I want to start with how you developed this project in the first place. What led you to form this group, and what initially motivated you to design this watch and have it manufactured as a collective project?
Well, actually, this taking it back just a little. In 2019, my wife and I went on a cruise from Budapest down to Nuremberg, and in Nuremberg, before we left, I'd been in contact with Rolf Lange. He's Marco Lange's dad and has been making watches. His whole story in and of itself is amazing. And so we went to visit him up in Dresden, a little place outside of Dresden. It looked like a little Switzerland, a little chalet he had, and he took us through and showed us all the things. It was just amazing. And so I said, I've got an idea. I said, what do you think of this idea? is that you loan us one of your watches, and I'll organize 12 guys, and we'll send it around the U.S. Uh, for all 12 of us. Is that like, here we got a $22,000 watch? We're just going to ship it around, and then everybody would have it for a month and put it up on social media and help people get to know about Rolf's thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we did that. In fact, we ended up with a baker's dozen because we had one guy. We had a little time at the end, and so he said he'd be interested. So we ended up with 13 guys. After we did that, then wham, down came the pandemic. I mean, it was just so almost perfectly timed. We had started sending it around, and I was interviewing Edward Malin of H. Moser at the Cellini's in New York City. And I had passed it on to somebody, and we really hadn't thought of anything like that. When the pandemic came, we were sort of stuck. Everybody knows that. Everyone was stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And so, sort of like idle hands is the devil's workshop. So I thought, well, maybe what we could do, we could get some guys together and see if we could put together really a first-class watch. And we'd contact, because I had, really good luck contacting Rolf Lange. And I thought, well, who else do I know? I had been in contact to some extent with Nicholas Wiederreck of Agenor. And he's just a super nice guy. And so a bunch of us got together and we started talking about a retrograde. And they gave us a number of different options of things we could do. And they were either not quite what we wanted or too expensive. And it was just so much was going on. I mean, people weren't available to make watches, and just so what we said, look, let's put it off for a year. Come back, come 2021, it'll all be gone. So anyway, what did we know? So we did that, and I came back and we thought, well, what we're going to do, we're going to start with something simple, and we just like a three-handed watch and so forth. And I said we'd like an Agenhor base. There was a possibility of starting with an ETA base or a base by Vaucheur. We said, no, we wanted one by Agenhor. So anyway, so they put something together for us. And then the next thing we knew, we had a brand new movement, the AGH 6801. Yes. So, oh boy.
It's I have to say, people have done worse things with idle hands and disposable income. Let's start there.
Yeah, I know. I'm surprised. Yeah, they certainly have.
So
anyway, yeah, go ahead.
I remember that you guys had basically this platform on Facebook called Pure Horology, if I'm not mistaken, where the conversation initially developed, and then you, of course, as you developed the project, you wanted to have a certain coherence and consensus and direction. Of course, can you talk about that cat herding process with me a little bit?
Yeah, well, what we were hoping to do was to get 20 guys. Somehow, I think that Nicholas Wiederreck said, we said, could we do it with 20? Because we had to have a minimum. He said, well, we'll see what we can do. Well, long story short, we ended up with 50. And so we started working on it, and the different parts that we had to get. Now, the movement, once we got the movement, then we knew exactly what the watch was going to look like in terms of where the different shafts are going to go and so forth. And so what we did, and this turned out to be very important. And by the way, too, I really encourage other guys to get together and do stuff. People don't wait for anybody else. Just go ahead and do it and organize it. And so we did that, and we wanted to have all of the top everything was, we wanted to do it. We figured, well, if we're going to do it, we might as well get the very best. Out of pure dumb luck, we got one of the best designers in Switzerland.
Well, I
And
mean, look, I highly doubt that, and I appreciate your humility, but really, I think the whole process also gives me an idea, or rather confirms what I already know about your passion and knowledge, because you started with the beating heart of the watch, right? You chose what the movement is going to be, what caliber is going to power this timepiece. And then basically you followed the principles of good old school watchmaking, before vertical integration and making everything in-house became a very nice marketing ploy, where you would actually knock on the doors of the best makers for every little piece of the watch. And I know I interrupted you right at that moment.
that's okay.
So
No,
you found the designer, which gave you this retrofuturistic car shape, as the profile of the case. Can you tell me a little bit about the case designer and how it came together?
Matthew, he was more than just a designer. One of the crucial things we needed for the case was when we talked to Voutilanen and Catton about it, they said they gave us these specs that they needed so that they could make a case that would exactly fit the movement. And so, we we didn't know how to do that, but our designer did. And so we went ahead with the design. Now, on the design of it, we had sort of what we called our North Star. We were using the 37 millimeter version of Philippe Dufour's Simplicity. That was our North Star. Even though we wanted ours to be 39%, not percent, but millimeters, 39 millimeters for the width of ours, which we ended up getting. And then there's a process that our designer put us through that was really interesting. It was called a mood board. I hadn't heard of that before. And so we went through and we talked about it, and we had different kinds of things we looked at. We looked at the hands and everything. And with like I said, our North Star was the simplicity, both in terms of what we wanted to do. And now that's a little different one. That's a simplicity, but I think it's a different version. The one that, that's it. The one that says 37 over to that one right there. That's the one. Mm-hmm. And that was what we were looking at, the Breguet hands, and sort of, but we definitely wanted Arabic numbers instead of Roman numerals. And because we didn't want it to be just like it, but we wanted it to be sort of that idea, the idea of simplicity and just a really clean dial. Now, I'm not sure how, but it did. The hands, instead of going with the Breguet hands, we decided to use Observatory Hands. I had been reading this new book on Derek Pratt, and I was looking at some different watches that he made, and also a couple of us had these Urban Jurgensen watches, and we liked the Observatory Hands. It was sort of an interesting thing. So we talked about that, and we came down to should we have Breguet hands or should we have Observatory hands? And this was the one that we had a consensus on. The interesting thing, and I think, Eli, the thing that makes this work was the whole concept of consensus. The idea that we would vote on something, we didn't like that idea, not because we were anti-democratic, but we didn't want to end up with a watch that 51% loved and 49% hated. And so, we had to work with consensus, and that's a lot of work, and it's a lot harder than, we could vote things up and down, and God knows what we ended up with. But, and here's how we ended up making a lot of decisions. Was that, well, what should we do? I don't know. What should we do? Well, let's ask. Let's ask Nicholas or let's ask Matthew, because these guys are experienced. And that was something else we learned, that the connectivity between these top watchmakers with the case makers, with the dial makers, with the hand makers. Have you ever heard of Fiedler Hands, Eli?
I have. Yes, that's the ones you have.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the one. We hadn't heard of them. We had no idea who they were. And the more we found out about it, it's just, my God, these guys are special, and they are. And they so we had Fiedler do the hands for us, and we told them what we wanted. And then here's the thing I think is important, and I think any group who plans to do something like this is to have people who will work together. I mean, on a watch. I mean, if you got a guy in Timbuktu and somebody else on, the dark side of the moon, they're not going to work together as well as somebody who are used to working together or who know each other and know the business. And this makes it very difficult for a lot of newcomers who are like, they're making or hands or dials or cases or whatever they're doing, because they're not known. And we certainly didn't want to exclude anybody, but we wanted to be sure that we dealt with the very best that we could find. Like, for example, Metallim, the way we found them, that if you take a look at that 37 millimeter Simplicity, that's who did the dial. So we contacted them. We said, we want a dial like that, except we want Arabic numbers. And then, of course, we had to get, have Matt to do it for us. And then we wanted some other things that were a little eccentric, like the sub-seconds. They said, well, you can have, I forgot where. I think it was either 9 o'clock or 6 o'clock, but I'm not positive. This was the options we were given. So, well, we thought it looked cool around 8 o'clock. There's a whole gear set. And we ended up 8:30. How about 8:30? That's perfect. We wanted something that was different. It's sort of like a beauty mark on on a model or something.
I think, there's something about this watch that when I look at it as an outsider, right, someone who was completely removed from all this process of negotiation and compromise, I find in it this nice balance between all sorts of modern and classical elements that somehow come together beautifully, but in a unique way. And you did say something about democracy. I think there is actually a principle behind this that is a democratic process, which is really democratizing high horology in a way, because as a result of this process and as a result of this project, you were basically able to offer to not a dozen, not 20 people, but actually 70 people access to a time-only high horological watch under $10,000, and I think more around maybe 7,000. I want to say at the subscription process at the beginning of the process.
I think it's going to run us eventually around eight something. There were a lot of things we weren't planning on. We weren't planning on a designer. We weren't planning on straps. The idea was that we'd get a watch without any straps, and then we'd go buy our own straps. But at some point, we ended up with the straps. I'm glad we did too, because the company, it was a Swiss company. And here's the thing about people knowing each other, knowing who to work with. One of the members mentioned something about a teardrop. We wanted teardrop lugs and a more traditional looking teardrop lug. The ones we ended up with were even better. These were totally unique, with sort of the teardrop belt that Matthew made for us. And the buckle was a separate company. We had everything was separate. They were Boosted Door, I think, is the name of our buckle company. And so one of our guys said, "Well, what about a teardrop buckle?" They had shown us something. I said, "Come on, man! I mean, a teardrop buckle, that's a little much." Well, they made a teardrop buckle for us, and it was really cool with our little Lyrique logo on it. And the whole process. Oh, and then another thing, you may notice how flattened the crown is. We wanted that too for lots of reasons.
That's that's the kind of thing that I was talking about. When I think of classic dress watches, there are a lot of elements like that, like how flat that crown is lying on the case, even the knurled finish on it. But then you have again those like the offset eccentric subsidiary dial, the lugs, that on the one hand are akin to teardrop lugs, but actually take after a kind of aerodynamic design that's more modernist. So there's a lot going on, but somehow all these moving pieces come together quite harmoniously, if I may be allowed the pun, in the Lyrique.
Yeah. Oh no, we're very happy with the way it turned out, and we even hear the one thing we do have. I can show you. This is I don't know. I can't. There it is.
Let's see.
That's our case. Yeah, that's our case.
Nice.
We went through again. This was one of our guys who's from Holland. This case is sort of cool. It's got a little piece of solid board in there that you wrap the watch around, and then you close it up and so forth. But instead of a hard case, we found out that the shipper had the people shipping it had a special case themselves that it was going to be shipped in. And so we figured this would be a lot more practical. I mean, as sort of as a little travel case and some other things like that. So, we're right now, the hardest part is waiting for it. And I'll tell you why. It's handmade. There's just everything is handmade on it. We have for example, we have they showed us what's it called? The barrel bridge. There's a barrel bridge. And I looked at the anglage on it. The anglage on the barrel bridge is, let me see. Yeah, so you can see the barrel right there and the bridge. But when I looked at the anglage, I just thought, my God, that thing is amazing. Somebody like we weren't expecting it that good. And I think it's part, if you deal with really good people. Oh yeah. That's another thing too. This is the it's called Agonase. The Agonase, that's how you pronounce it. They told us ASE. They have the two levers with their flying the kite with the shooting stars. Now the thing about this gear is that it has all of the teeth have these little springs on it, and this is to prevent any slippage. And so between the gear train, when you have an eccentric gear like you have with the sub-second, you have to, there's some kind of hesitation between the gear train and the second gear, the gear that turns the second hand. So we were just expecting a run-of-the-mill standard gear, but man, I tell you, they gave us that one, and I just thought, geez, that's so much fun.
Yeah, and like you said, I think like you imply here, I think anywhere else you can find it, I guess, is the Van Cleef and Arpels.
On the Poetic Wish. Yeah, on the AGH 6001 and 6002. On the Poetic Wish watch, most of the stuff, one of the things that they have, if you look at people who won the Grand Prix awards, you'll find so many of them have Agenor parts to it. And they'll have some kind of module that makes it what it was, why it won. And so, I mean, like I said, we didn't ask for any of this extra stuff. They just did it because that's how they do things. It wasn't. I mean, I'd like to say, well, we're hard bargainers. Oh, we didn't know diddly squat. I mean, we really didn't. But we learned a lot. God, we tell you, all of us did. We thought we knew stuff. We don't.
I really, I mean, again, I really do admire your traditional humility. I'm sure a lot of thought went into this, but you are also dealing with people, like you implied, who have a certain respect for artisanship and handwork, and they would have felt they were falling short of your expectations, whether articulated or not, if they didn't get to a certain standard, if they didn't abide by the high standards they set for themselves.
Yeah.
You were exalting a little bit the virtues of patience when waiting for a hand manufactured watch, and that's the real meaning of manufacture, right? That everything is actually handmade as much as possible. Thankfully, you weren't sitting on your hands, right? You had this exciting process with submitting this watch for competition for the GPHG. How did that come about? And can you tell me a little more about that process?
Well, we wanted it under 10,000. And so for ourselves, and we thought, well, what we'll do is we'll put it in the Petite Aiguille. Now, if you look at the price of a watch that you buy, I used to be in publishing, and the publishing sort of rule of thumb is that your price should be 10 times the cost of production. Okay. And so if your book cost, let's say, $2 to produce, you should sell it for $20. Well, I found out that was true in a lot of different businesses. They use the same formula. And so if you have a watch that your retail price is on, like we have, is 9,500 Swiss francs, then it should cost about $950 to produce. And so what we heard was that we weren't exactly playing by the rules, because we were about 85% of our production went to the watch. And so that was, if you take something with 85% versus, 10 or 20% of all of the costs being the watch, I think that we were seen as not being exactly fair. And, none of us wanted to do anything unfair. We just didn't know any better. And I think we did a good job. We did too good of a job with social media. Everybody knew about it. Say, wait a minute, you guys can't do that. They didn't say that to us, but I can understand. I mean, this was something we picked up, and they have a point. We can't. They ought to have maybe they'll have a subscription category some year. What we did, we just followed exactly Abraham Louis Breguet's. That's where we got the idea of setting up a prescription. And so that's why we didn't think we were doing anything that was sort of out of line. But, if I were sort of a regular watchmaker in terms of, trying to turn a profit and, paying the staff and everything, I think I would find this a little not fair, if you know what I mean. And so, we understand that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just you had you had different principles guiding the work and the project. It wasn't primarily commercial, right? This is
No, not at all.
it is what it is. This is a passion project that grew to encompass a global collective, and like you said, through social media, in fact, the global community of watch enthusiasts who weren't directly involved. So it's like you said, maybe in a way you outgrew some of those categories that were placed in front of you for the GPHG.
Yeah, we didn't want to be the skunk at the garden party, you know, and it may look like there was some, but that wasn't the intention. We hope in future ones we'll see where, you know, that would be what would be fair. But it's I'll tell you, you know, it was something we had. You know, the best part about it was that this one guy, we had guys from all over the world, and
Mhm.
literally all over the world. I think the only continent we didn't have people from was Antarctica, um, but that was about it. And this one guy from, I think he was from China. He said, you know, he said, I was really surprised about this. I thought all of the arguments were going to be over money. He said they weren't. They were all over quality, and and that was, you know, to me, it sort of dawned on me that yeah, he was right, because that was all we cared about. And on this, at the same time, though, we wanted to keep it under a certain. Well, we wanted it at $7,500, and we came pretty close to that.
It's I mean, again, you know, I like the fact that there was a good amount of thinking and planning, and yet during the process you were able to also, you know, fall into these ideas that worked out for the best. You know, the way the leather strap that you weren't even imagining as part of the design initially, the way that plays with the hands, the way that, as you described, the buckle is going to mirror the shape of the lugs, the way that that beautiful pouch you showed me also reflects the color scheme. It just, you know, sometimes fortune is on the side of people who have the right intentions, it seems.
You know, the one other thing. Let me tell you a story about the strap and the color of the strap.
Yes,
Um,
please.
we went through. Boy, our designer was dealt with the. There's somebody who does color. There's somebody who does this. There's somebody who does that, and with the type of material that they're using. So we got the Pantone color. It's just simply a code. And we took that, and that was what the hands were. He said, okay, we want Pantone this. And so we went to the strap maker and said the same thing. We want Pantone this. Totally different colors using the Pantone colors. Nothing wrong with Pantone. It was the different materials that it was on.
Yes,
And so our designer worked with the strap maker to make sure that they match the color of the hands.
that's beautiful. It's beautiful. And again, you know, you may or may not expect that from a designer, but certainly he was so invested in his own work that he wanted it to be reflected in the best possible way.
Well, let me tell you how we got the designer, and this is I will recommend to anybody who takes this on. Listen to the pros. Okay, when we asked, they said, "Well, you need a designer." I thought, well, you know, can't the dial maker design it, or can't, you know? We didn't know anything, and so they said, "Well, this would be a good guy for a designer." So we thought, yeah, let's go ahead with him, and it turned out they were right, because you know it's people who think they know a lot about horology, like us, found out that we didn't know as much as we thought. And that's the thing about, I think, a lot of collectors, is that the interesting thing about uh, watch collection is there's always so much more to learn, and
There's a
that's
there's a
what makes it
art and
interesting.
there's a art and science to it. You are
You
meaning to say.
bet.
But so this was both a very enjoyable, it seems, at least now that you are approaching the end of it, now that you are getting so much closer to the final product, a very joyful process, but also a very educational process for you, as you're implying. You learned more, in fact, about what goes into what horology goes into actually realizing
Yeah,
something in this world, a real object that you can grasp and hold on to.
that's exactly right. I couldn't put it any better than that.
And w- did you yet get a hold of the prototype? When is that going to reach you?
Oh, when we're going to get the watch?
Hmm.
As long as somebody doesn't test positive for COVID, as long as the guy doing the anglage doesn't have a hangover. There are so many things involved. Um, we saw the barrel bridge, and it has all of the engraving on it that we have. You had a shot of the back, and that was another thing I do want to talk about. The You may notice that we have the case manufactured by Voutilanen and Caton. We have the dial, not the dial, but the movement by Agenor. You can see that around the barrel. We have all of that stuff.
Mhm.
And then we have the adjusted to 6 positions. Those are all really important to us because we didn't want to say, oh, you've seen these watches. What kind of movement do you have? Swiss made. Well, you know, who we we might think we know who that is, but we wanted credit due to the people, to the craftsmen who made it. We didn't. We simply sort of provided a sort of an umbrella or a way to do it in terms of finance and direction. But the details of it and everything, just we're so happy. But we'll be happier when we get it. We have we have 3 groupings. The first group we're going to ship to Asia, Australia, and Canada. The second group will be to the U.S., and then the last group will be to Europe. And we hope to get, we'll have to see. I I'm very anxious to get it. By the way, too, one thing, we had one watch that was going to go to GPHG, but
Mhm.
if we didn't, since we didn't make the nominations, that was something that was, here we have this extra watch. And so what I'm going to do with it, the Horological Society of New York has a service for doing a chronometer test. And so I'm going to send it in. So 15 days, they run it through the chronometer test, and we'll see what happens with it.
Yes, I was actually very excited that now, like after so many decades, for the first time, you have this sort of chronometer certification that's issued from the US.
Yeah.
It's back to the future kind of thing, just like this beautiful design. I have a couple of questions from the audience, but before
Okay.
I get to those, I have maybe something that will reflect one of these questions, but that I wanted to ask you at any rate. So Hallmilk says, what will Bill look for in watches now after the process that he didn't care about before? So we can keep this suspended for a second, because what I wanted to ask is this: what is next for Lyrique? What's next for Etude number 1 after it comes out, after it's delivered to the 70 very lucky global group of owners? Uh, and are you planning to pursue perhaps Lyrique as a brand, or at least as a heading for future projects that will deploy and employ some of what you have learned as part of developing this watch?
Yeah. One thing I forgot to mention, um, somebody said it's probably a good idea if we saw a Swiss lawyer about the name and to get a trademark name on it. So Lyrique is got a Swiss trademark on it. And so the reason for that is simply just protection and stuff. And there was a lawyer. We asked him who the best lawyer was. They told us, and so we got a good lawyer on that. And I think we want to we're going to move ahead. I think the next one, sort of as a jump, is going to be we're going to add another complication. We're talking about something with the Zulu hour on it, which is for a pilot's watch. The other one we're talking about is doing a guilloche. I mean, we're really thinking a special guilloche, not just sort of a stamped one. But we're thinking about that. We've got to find out what the price is and everything else. We would really like something with a rose engine done, and we'll probably go ahead and use the same designer. By the way, too, Matu has a couple other watches that did make it to nominations in the Grand Prix, and so we're going to be rooting for him as well.
Of course. I've taken the liberty of posting the links to his website as well for Mathieu Allegret, so people learn more about his work, because there are some other watch designs that he has on his website, and all of which are really beautiful. So you do have a couple of other projects, but they have not yet materialized in the same way. I'm guessing you are waiting for this to first come out, and you'll move from there.
Well, you're familiar with how we sort of proceeded with pure horology. We started with that and sort of kicked things around. And there's another project that I don't know where it is right now, but a third one that we may do with Crenode on something. We're trying to get something for very affordable. I mean, this was something around, we'll say under $3,500, something like that. And by under, I don't mean $34.99, but something more affordable for more collectors. This is the thing that I think is important for us as collectors. I mean, at some point, there's got to say, well, this is what we want, and the only way to get it is to go do it. Nothing against manufacturers. I think we'd be up the creek without a paddle were it not for, more traditional watchmakers. They're the ones that keep it going. And what we do is we bring in a different kind of market that does not exist. And that market is people who want this higher horology, but there's no way in the world they can afford it, especially with the continually rising prices. And so we're not taking away from anyone. That was something important. One of maybe I don't want to buy some watch that was popular and people like and so forth. But I want something really nice, but that would cost me $70,000, and I don't have that.
And let's admit it. It's also a problem of access too when it comes to certain high horological makers. You might even have the money for that one particular watch, but sometimes you have to now bundle up your purchases with 2-3 other watches to get the watch you want, and that's not necessarily the approach that every enthusiast and every collector wants to take, and no one should be forced to take that approach anyway. So you are, in fact, like you said, creating a new market or giving access to people where there isn't. So that's why I wanted to underline that earlier. Maybe too highfalutin of a praise for the watch, but it is really democratizing high horology in a way, because it is giving access to people who don't otherwise have the access to it.
Yes, good way of putting it. Exactly. That's the democratizing part. The consensus part is sort of like, when you're in kindergarten, they tell you play nice in the sandbox, and that essentially is what consensus is. You don't tear up the sandbox; you play nicely in it. And I think by doing that, I think that's how we can get things really very interesting. And like I said, he has some ideas that I thought were just flat out stupid, and they turned out I was wrong. And the willingness for all of us to listen to each other is paramount. It really is. And you don't end up, there's a lot of stuff, a project by committee always looks weird. That's not true. A stupid committee, it would look that way, but a stupid individual would look bad too. When you have a group of people with the right intentions, you can do things that no one of us could have done by themselves. By the way, let me add something else, Eli. Uh, there's some other groups who are one called the Collective, I think, and these guys have what they've done. They get together, and one, for example, I know went to H. Moser, and they had a special H. Moser watch made for them, and some other groups that. So we're not the only group that you have a bunch of watch collectors getting together to get something for. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, right. These are, this is the one with the bezel, and so they end up with a really different kind of watch, and it's something that apparently H. Moser can do because they have these. They have to plan a whole lot because they spend a lot of development time on a watch that nobody buys. That's going to be expensive. On the other hand, if they have a watch that is sort of like they're not too sure about, but a bunch of collectors say, look, we'll buy X numbers of these, then it becomes more worthwhile. And so it's good for both the collector and the manufacturer.
Mm-hmm. And this, guys, again, was Collective Horology. They have a website where they present some of their previous collaborations. That was with H. Moser. They have one with Zenith, IWC, Uhrwerk, and even the Southern California homegrown watchmaker, J.N. Shapiro, as well. Which, speaking of Rose Engine guilloche work, we have a master basically who is an American who does it really well. Maybe you can look into some of his work. I'm sure you're already familiar, but yeah, that's I always admired also the passion and knowledge he brings into his pieces. Really admirable. So I'm gonna actually bring up a question from the audience,
Okay.
from my friend Thomas Burnett. I think a common friend, in fact. I always see him in Watch Art Sci as well in your streams. Bill, were you going for a design from a certain era when you were designing Lyrique Étude #1, or was it left completely to the designer? The lugs on the watch look like they're straight out of the 1940s. Beautiful.
Boy, that's what we had. Like I said, we started with the what's called the Simplicity 37, which is a 37 millimeter Simplicity by Dufour, and we talked about that as our North Star, and then our designer came in with different ideas and doing different things, and he finally ended up with this belt that he put around it with that terminated in a I think a fairly unique style of teardrop, and so he referred to it as a teardrop belt. So I again the in terms of it's like this or like that, that car that we had in there, that's what it's like. And designers are, man, designers are in a whole different world, and I don't. And we have a daughter who's designer, so I gotta be careful. they, they're wonderful. We can't do without them. And I used to, in programming and developing things, we had to balance out what the designer wanted, and they'd put a ton of graphics on there that would slow it down to mud. And we had to say, well, is there some way we can do this, and had to lighten things up. Now, if you want to see a bad website, see one that a developer designed. They're ugly, they're awful. Yeah. Now, see, that was sort of the inspiration of that, to create this for it. Now, maybe 1940, maybe 1930. It's you see these designs throughout periods, and then some of them come back out of nowhere. That they become popular again. I'm trying to think, there was something, I forgot what it was. There was something recently that, I know what it is. Yeah. Now this may seem funny, but there was some very hip styles. And it was simply a matter of your blue jeans. Instead of having the blue jeans trimmed just to the right, they rolled them up. I used to do that when I was a kid back in the 50s.
Right.
And now, some hipsters running around that way thinking he's cool and invented it, but it's not, So the great question about, is this from the 1940s? I don't know. I'm from the 1940s, but they may not be.
What it reminds me of, and because the reference that you just gave, it actually reminds me of 60s Vacheron Constantin Chronomètre Royal. They sometimes call it Batman. I don't know if you are familiar with this one. I think someone once said, it really belongs. It really looks like it belongs to Batman's utility belt or something, and somehow it's stuck as a.
That one does. I agree. Yeah, I'm a big. I have a sort of almost like I don't know, like little ducklings. They call it, I don't know, what is it, pinning or something like that, when they sort of track on something. I'm that way with Vacheron Constantin. I like them a lot, So it's like, and I've always liked it, even though they do a lot of things that what are you guys doing that for? I still like them despite that. So they're ones I like a lot. And Vacheron Constantin. In terms of designs, I think that, I don't know. I have, if you look at enough designs, you can find them in different periods, I think. But 1940s, they're a little. Yeah, there's a lot of designs in that I like, and they could be. That's something else too. There is so much I don't know. Somebody somebody started watch collecting day before yesterday, discovers something. He says, "Bill, what about this?" I never heard of that before. Tell me more about it. And so there could be something like that. I don't think it's quite Batman, but it could be. Maybe it's the Flash. I don't know.
No, it's again, it's when you come up with a unique piece of design that somehow sticks, that still looks familiar. That's when people are grasping for these nicknames. So I think it's not a bad thing at all. No. And I'm sure at some point, perhaps it will get a nickname in addition to this very simple and beautiful name, Étude number 1, that also reflects the kind of study and the kind of learning process that went into this project as well. Yasha has a question that's really like a comment, and maybe for a future direction. Yasha V says, what's the price on a Lange Odysseus? I think the list price is now somewhere around 35K in stainless steel. If you can get it, they don't really sell it as a first-time purchase. Just hinting at a possible viability of a future 100mm integrated bracelet sports watch project. Just
Yeah,
throwing it out.
there are, you know, basically what we do is that we're taking it pretty slowly, like we're adding that one complication in our next watch, and then on the second watch we're using essentially the Etude one, but we're using guilloche. It's not going to look at all like the first one.
Mhm.
And so what we're doing is that I think if we try to make a big leap, one of the guys who I like a lot, one of our members, saying, "How about this? This is a great idea. We're going to have jumping seconds." And I was thinking of the vagabond days, and I thought, oh,
Right.
"Holy Mother of God, we have jumping seconds." Well, I don't think we'd be able to afford it. Wouldn't be able to do anything else, and it's sort of like that. But that's a good. It's not a bad idea. It's just like there are all of these other things. Just to give you an example of the kinds of detail we have to consider. Like we were thinking, well, we really like that case, so we'll have one more with that case, except we're going to go with the guilloche. But
Yeah.
in terms of the dial maker, we got to be sure that they have exactly the same width of the dial for the case, because the case was totally made exactly for that dial. It's like,
So same movement, same case, but an engine turned dial basically is one of the next projects,
we'll see.
possibly.
I
And
can say I'm
and
not trying to be
is that going to be Romans perhaps rather than Arabic numerals? Possibly. Yes. No.
there's
No, I'm
another
just kidding.
project. There's an even another project that they're saying, hey, well, why don't we do this? We started with the uh, uh, 37 millimeter do for simplicity. Why don't we do this? we'll have it everything the same except the position of the small seconds. So there's and then this other thing, I saw this wonderful dial on a De Bethune. The De Bethune, and I'm probably saying that wrong. The De Bethune with two sides to it. One
Yes.
has sort of the triangle-y thing, and the other has this sort of two track
Yes.
numbers. The outer track is 1 through 60, and the inner track is the 1 through 12. I mean, to me, it's one of the most beautifully designed dials I've ever seen. I really like that dial. So maybe there'll be something like that. But see, the thing is that, and here's why that question about the 1940s was so important, is that we're looking at it as more like a North Star
Mhm.
rather than anything else. There's nothing like, oh, we want to do that. No, we want sort of in that neighborhood. That's the kind of thinking. So
Yeah, it's what I really like is that you have put something in place now. You have secured the name as you mentioned. Now you have a case, right? Rolex
yeah.
Rolex has the oyster. Lyrique has the famous um, belt teardrop case. That's very unique to it, and I'm glad you are going to iterate that with a guilloche dial, with an engine turned dial, and you have the GMT/Zulu time project. And
One thing you
go
like
ahead.
real
Yeah.
quick. The engine turned. If we look at I forgot the name of the company, but there's a dial maker who has a whole set of guilloche you can get with a CNC, and most, including my the guilloche on my FP Journe, is that kind of one, and most people are that way. But if that's the one, very good. Gee,
Yeah.
boy, you know everything. The one in the lower right is the one I was talking about. Um, Here's the thing: is that if we go there and we find out that the rose turn would just put us, that just would be way too much for the watch, then we'll go with the other one. I mean, there are things that you think, well, let's try it and see what it is, and then we've got to find out the reality of it. And of course, our designer would love a rose turn because then he could do anything he wants, and we would want that. But on the other hand, if it kicks the price in such a way that that it's not going to work, I mean, you take Shapiro; he's charging $30,000 for the watch with a UWD movement in it. I don't know what the case is. Looks like a nice case to me. So but we're not doing that,
Right.
and so we got to find out where, in terms of affordability, where we are in the rose
Have
engine.
you looked at Benzinger in Germany by any chance? Because I know
Yeah.
their watches are quite at an affordable range and have beautiful guilloche dials in certain cases.
Yeah. Right now, what I think is probably, if we're working with a Swiss, it's sort of nice to work with all Swiss because, like I said, that the dial maker knows the case maker, knows the hand maker, and they can say, give them a call and say, hey, this is what we've got, and then they can go back and forth. Same thing in Germany. Say, hey, Marco, how about it? Would you finally make a nice simple movement that we could build on? And then there'd be the different German case makers, and then the German case makers would know the hand makers and the dial makers and so forth, which may include companies like Bissinger. So there's I think, first of all, let me say this: I really encourage other groups to do this. That's the thing about, we're not in competition with anybody.
That's right.
We're just a bunch of Rudy Poo collectors who are out trying to figure out a way that we can have the kind of watches we want.
Yeah, Bill. I mean, this was an amazing conversation. I feel like we can go for hours and hours, but I want to
Sorry.
be respectful of your time because I did tell you that it's only going to be an hour, so I don't want to hold you captive.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, no, you're not at all.
And again, thank you so much for coming over, guys. As you know, Bill has this incredible channel, Watch Art Sci, that again I find in exactly the style that I aspire to. So it's really an honor to host him here. He talked with us about the Lyrique Étude number 1, which is, I hope, only the first in a whole line of unique and inspirational watch designs that they will come up with. Thank you so much, Bill.
Well, thank you, and be sure to send me the URL, and I will put it up on the High Horology Lounge Facebook page.
Thank you. That's very generous. I will do it immediately right after the broadcast. And all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully, we'll be back with more interviews and more collaborations in the near future. It was really a great pleasure for me to host Bill Sanders from Watch Art Sci channel. He talked about the Lyrique Étude number 1 project, which is something that they designed as a subscription piece and offered to 70 different people, and it's almost there to be delivered as a final product. So I look forward to see what else is going to come up from this project. I look forward to seeing more of it. And guys, please hit the like button on your way out. Subscribe if you haven't. We're here for pure watch talk. And if you want to contribute in some other way, the crawling ticker is there. The information is included in the description, and I will also post the links in the chat. I will see you later in the next one. Bye.